We got some Browns free agency news to start off today's show as Cleveland has signed Ethan Pocic, the guard/center from the Seattle Seahawks. We're going to break this down, and then we're going to kind of catch up with the latest Browns news and rumors, including some draft targets. And I saw an interesting idea on Twitter yesterday and was listening to Twitter Spaces about the potential of the Browns getting a dome stadium. So we'll wrap up the show with that. But first, Jordan Schultz on the news. Early this morning, this is what I woke up to. Breaking, free agent center Ethan Pocic has agreed to terms with the Browns per source. Pocic is just 26 and has 40 career starts with the Seahawks as a former second-round draft choice. So let's learn who Ethan Pocic is. He's got 40 career starts and 57 total games since 2017 with Seattle. He's likely going to compete for that starting job with Nick Harris. Now, I did see just before we started filming that the job is Harris's. I don't need contract details for Pocic, but here's kind of my one takeaway as a guy that you may have never heard of. This could free up a draft spot for the Browns, meaning now Cleveland doesn't have to draft a center most likely in the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round, sort of towards day 3. They can use that pick at a different positional need because they don't want to just go into the season with only Nick Harris as the center on the table for the Cleveland Browns. But my big question for you is, have you ever heard of this guy? When I got the notification that the Browns have signed Ethan Pocic, I'd be lying to you if I said I jumped out of bed like, yes, we got a second-round bust, let's do this. Y for yes, N for no. Let me know what you think. He was definitely a Wikipedia guy for me. I had to look at his Wikipedia and be like, oh, I kind of remember him. If you think he's going to come in and start moving mountains like J.C. Treader, I hate to break your hearts, but, good depth piece. Let's go with that. Talk yourself into that. That's a good free agent spin zone. That's a good depth move right there. That's what you say when you've never heard of the player. Now, after the Deshaun Watson trade, the Browns don't have their first-round pick anymore, so we're going to look at some updated draft targets for the Cleveland Browns, get our feet wet with the NFL draft less than a month away. The Browns aren't just going to mail it in. They still have a couple big-ish picks, including a second-rounder. So the biggest needs for me, edge, wide receiver, and defensive tackle. That's not in any particular order because I think it's a bit polarizing. Right? I get the argument of defensive tackle should be the number one spot because they've only signed Taven Bryan and they lost their 2 starters in free agency and haven't brought back either Malik yet. But I just don't know how big of a influence a defensive tackle could have on the game by getting someone in the second round. They got 7 picks altogether. First selection is that 12th pick in round number 2. In fact, let's look at all their picks in the 2022 NFL Draft. A second, a pair of thirds, a fourth, 2 fourths, a 6th rounder, and a 7th rounder. Altogether, the Browns have 3 top 100 picks in the NFL Draft, so they've got some ammunition to play with here, and we're just going to find out and wait and see if the Cleveland Browns, want to go out and maybe even move into the first round with some of these picks here. But what's the Browns' biggest need, right? Is it edge, wide receiver, or defensive tackle? Let me know what you think their biggest need is in the NFL Draft. I think it's pretty obvious what I think it is because when we look at my round 2 draft targets, look who I lead off here with, okay? Wide receivers. I just like the idea of surrounding Deshaun Watson with even more ammunition. George Pickens, and so now we're done with the, Garrett Wilson, Treylon Burks conversations. Now we're looking at wide receivers in the second round. Pickens, who was a phenomenal athlete and a great wide receiver for Georgia, but you just didn't see enough of him because of injuries, tore his ACL. Basically, a year ago right now, in April of 2021, missed pretty much the entire season. Watson is a freak athlete. Comes out of North Dakota State, so you didn't watch him much, but he was very popular at the NFL Combine. Nick Bonito is a good pass rusher. He's going to put a lot of pressures on the QB. Logan Hall and Travis Jones are the defensive tackles that I could see the Browns going after. So if Cleveland decides, you know what, we've got Amari Cooper, we'll get another wide receiver in free agency, which, by the way, the rest of free agency is a huge factor for the Browns in trying to figure out what their first pick is going to be in the draft. Because if they get Jarvis Landry or Will Fuller, they're not going to pick a wide receiver most likely in round 2. But if they don't get any more wide receivers, I could see them going that route. Just like if they sign a defensive tackle in free agency, that will probably be a huge influence in whether or not they go get a defensive tackle. Now, those are my 5 top round 2 targets. Who's your top draft target? Try to keep it closer to round 2 because let's be honest, if it's Garrett Wilson, I hate to, be the party pooper here, but we're not going to get him in the second round. So let me know who your top draft target is for the Cleveland Browns. I've heard a lot of people say, I want a defensive tackle. I want a defensive tackle. Well, you know what? This is your show now. Here are the 2 defensive tackles I like kind of the most, Logan Hall and Travis Jones. Now, they're 2 different-esque type of players. Logan Hall is more of a flex defensive tackle, defensive end, pass rusher. He's faster than Travis Jones. He's a little smaller in terms of size than Travis Jones. As for Travis Jones, he's more of your prototypical run stopper, right? He's going to be over 300 pounds and clog up the middle of that defensive line. Not as great as getting after the quarterback, and the sacks and the tackles for loss speak for that. But if you want someone who's going to be just a huge guy right in the middle of that defensive line, more of your nose tackle, not quite. He can play the 3 technique. He can move around a little bit, but that's more your Travis Jones. If you want someone who's a bit of a combination of an edge rusher, not edge, but defensive end and defensive tackle, Logan Hall is your guy. Moving on to round number 3 now. Here are some targets to keep an eye on for. Again, you'll see a theme here. I think if the Browns go defense in round 2, then round 3 could be wide receiver like Khalil Shakir or John Mechie, Calvin Austin, Velus Jones Jr. So it's difficult at this point to try to predict who's going to be a round 2, round 3, round 4 guys, but this gives you an idea of a bit of a measuring stick of what to maybe expect in these rounds. Some players might go up earlier, right? It's the NFL draft. Anything can happen. But I have to tell you guys something. I have a full-blown addiction to the wide receiver class this year. And I know that every single draft, we talk ourselves into pretty much every position group and every player. But this wide receiver class, I think we'll look back at and go, remember the 2022 wide receiver class? That class was absolutely loaded. That's what I'm kind of getting from this wide receiver class. There is just so much talent that I think there'll be players picked in the second round who may end up having better careers than the first round guys. And that's the draft for you. It's a bit of a crapshoot. But this wide receiver class, if the Browns don't pick someone until, say, round 3, they still could be getting a stud wide receiver. That's how deep and loaded this class is. So producer Jeremy today runs our Steelers channel. So do 2 things for me if you hate the Steelers. Say boo Jeremy and F the Steelers because I want to catch them in subs. We're about 4,000 away. Jeremy and I share a desk, right, Jeremy? And every single day, maybe not every, moment I walk in, but every now and then he'll be like, so what's the Browns sub count at? And then he reminds me of the Steelers. So if you hate the Steelers, maybe you have a Steelers coworker, a Steelers neighbor, because let's face it, this fan base is just all over the place. Bunch of bandwagoners. Then go ahead, sub because you hate Pittsburgh and you want the Browns to catch up to them, not only on the field, which, by the way, for the first time in how long do the Steelers have the worst quarterback in the division? I was trying to think about this right before we started filming. A long time. And that's a great sight to see. Let's go on to round number 4 now. This is more of your, I like the idea of going offensive lineman, kind of getting just best player available pieces at this point. So Arizona State, Kellen Diesch, Zach Tom, Matthew Butler. Butler went to Tennessee, my alma mater, and so I always going to just be a little biased and throw one of my Vols on the show. But he's a very good interior defensive tackle who can get in the backfield and kind of wreak havoc. Darion Kendrick, I put a corner there because if the Browns don't extend Denzel Ward soon, it makes you wonder what his future is. And then a linebacker. Even though the Browns don't have a glaring need at that spot, at this point in the draft, you go best player available. I mean, that's kind of my life mindset. Best player available mode because you're just looking for talent at this point. So if there's a really good, say, linebacker still on the board, but you're like, you know what, we still could use a nice backup offensive tackle. No, take talent, right? If you got too many good linebackers, that's not a bad problem to have. I like the idea of just drafting the best players once you get out of the first, second, maybe even into the third round. Speaking of the third round, we're on to the Final Four in March Madness. So if you want to put some cheddar, put some dough, put some money where your mouth is, do it at BetUS. Head on over to chatsports.com/bet. Use promo code Browns125. They give you a 125% deposit bonus. Final Four is this upcoming weekend. Here are the championship odds. And listen, you're never going to get a better payout. So if you think the Blue Devils, and I really hope Coach K does not win, are going to, come out and end up cutting the nets, you're not going to get better odds. So if you bet, say, $100, you're going to get paid out $155. That's what that plus 155 means. So this is the best time to get the odds. Get on it now, chatsports.com/bet. Promo code Browns125. As for rounds 5 through 7, I kind of just lumped these together because, let's be honest, no one wants to hear about targets in the final round of the NFL draft because most of those guys never even play a snap. But some names to keep an eye on for some deep sleepers because I think Andrew Berry is beginning to establish himself as a good drafter. I like the idea of maybe going tight end. I'm not going to even try to attempt to say that last name. Okuwanuku. Producer Jeremy, do you know how to say it? Because he's like jumping up and down. We'll get him mic'd up because I think he's ready. But some other good ones here. Jeremy.
It's Okonkwo.
Okonkwo. Okay. So that's it right there. Jeremy maybe is cousins with this guy. I don't know. Adam Anderson. Anytime you get a Georgia player from this year, you're doing something right. The Georgia Bulldogs were so good that they have so many players who didn't even start that are going to get drafted because that's how talented they are. But the name that I haven't mentioned yet, and my favorite name, maybe the entire draft, is the punter, Matt Araiza out of San Diego State. I think I got it right. But listen, this is a punter that if you took his numbers, and I get it, college is not the same as the NFL, but if you took punter numbers, which is pretty similar because at the end of the day, still just kicking a football, it's pretty, independent, and you put him in the NFL, he would have been the number one punter in the NFL by a mile, okay? You've already got so many talents, so many positions. Why not get the best punter in the NFL? Flip the field. I want this guy. I want him bad. He has gone from a good undrafted free agent signing to he may not even be on the board in the 6th round, right? We're seeing some teams like the Bengals with Evan McPherson get a little frisky, draft a special teams guy early. I could see him flying off the board in even the 4th round because some team will be like, you know what? That's a guaranteed starter right there and a good punter as opposed to let's hope this offensive guard works out, all right? That's how much I like this guy. Let's wrap up the show with this interesting story I saw on Twitter yesterday. Browns may be going to get a new stadium. So there's a bit of a domino effect going on. The Titans are looking to upgrade their stadium, and so are the Buffalo Bills. And now there's this idea. I got this off Twitter yesterday. Daryl, who covers the Browns, tweeting out, quote tweeting an AP NFL article about Tennessee Governor Bill Lee plans to propose $500 million for a new stadium, yada, yada, yada. Buffalo, now Tennessee, Cleveland, you're about to be on deck soon. What do you guys think? Do you want the Browns to get a dome stadium? Type D for dome or P for pass. I don't know. I'm a little torn on it because I get it. An indoor stadium is cool, and for the city, it does great things. You can host events. You can have Final Fours, concerts. You can have way more stuff going on there. But at the end of the day, there's something about AFC North cold football that just feel maybe a retractable roof that could work, I guess. But I'd be worrisome that they get it, and then they would keep it closed during the winter, but open, during the fall and whatnot. I want cold weather football. Like, that's my favorite kind of football. In December with snow coming down, that's when football is really going to kick it into a higher gear. So I personally am a sucker for cold weather football, but if you disagree, that's fine. Let me know in the comments. All right, that's going to do it for us here on today's show. We're going to catch up with you guys later with the latest Cleveland Browns news and rumors.